the Foreign Office is currently engaged and has been over the past week in extensive conversations with Qatar, which is crucial to this issue because the Qataris are both speaking to the Israelis and Hamas.
Yeah.
And I think our focus, the UK's focus, is alleviating the situation in Gaza and primarily also getting the hostages being held by Hamas released. There are fears that there are British hostages among those people too. So it seems that is the focus. And the concern from the UK government side, I think, is that if Israel goes, whilst they won't say this publicly yet, if Israel is seen to be acting disproportionately, what the UK is really concerned about and what the Americans are concerned about is the potential for other actors in the region to be drawn in. So we've heard a lot about the fact that Hezbollah in Lebanon, we could end up with them coming into the mix. We could have Syria coming in. So that seems to be what's driving the focus in the UK government.
Here. Look, so politics this week, there's been a lot about Israel, obviously. UK support for Israel and its right to defend itself is basically the situation. That's what Rishi Sunak keeps saying. Will that support, do you think, continue no matter in what form and with what ferocity Israel does respond militarily?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And the issue that we've had over the last 24 hours is we've seen that the Israelis are now preparing for potentially a full-scale ground incursion into Gaza. And what does the UK do at that point if it leads to, as the UN and other humanitarian organisations are warning, a humanitarian catastrophe? Now, so far, as you say, Rishi Sunak has issued unconditional support for Israel. He said, we will be standing with you today, tomorrow and always. But I thought it was quite interesting listening to Grant Shapps on the BBC yesterday when he was asked, well, what do you make explicitly of the 24-hour order to evacuate from Gaza to the south to Khan Yunis, and he would not be drawn and would not explicitly say we support that order. Now, I think pressure will grow on the UK government to take a firm line should Israel go into Gaza today and we see the kind of scenarios that people are fearing. I was listening to Kim Darroch, the former UK ambassador to the US, speaking on the radio this morning, and he sounded quite surprised that the UK government couldn't find that nuanced line, which is we support Israel and its right to defend itself, but we feel that this 24-hour order is maybe too quick, and it will be quite interesting because if the Israelis do go in and we don't say anything, there is a risk, I think, that the UK government could be accused of kind of giving a green light to that. So, and also what is striking so far is that the Americans, Lloyd Austin, the US Defense Secretary, I mean, he said in his comments yesterday that Israel needs to remember it's a democracy, it needs to behave within the confines of international law. Now, the Americans seem to be taking a firmer line on that than we do. So it will be interesting to see how things develop.
Does it, in the end, matter what we do? I mean, we're not the Americans, you know. I mean, we don't have the same influence and power in the region. We don't send the same amount of money and support and military support and etc. to Israel. Do they really care in Israel what our views are?
You know, that's a very important point, actually. I mean, it is true. The UK, Britain is not the world's policeman anymore. That job fell to the Americans after the Suez crisis, and they have been playing that role ever since. The reality, I think the stark answer is no, not really. The Israelis ultimately are going to do what the Israelis are going to do. That said, whether the Americans and the Gulf states in the region are actually softening the Israeli position, I think we might even be seeing signs of that this morning because the Israelis haven't gone in. There was a limited raid overnight, but so far we haven't seen that full-scale incursion. The Israelis have given a hospital in central Gaza more time to evacuate, so it could be that that's happening. Without being unfair to the UK government, I know that the Foreign Office is currently engaged and has been over the past week in extensive conversations with Qatar, which is crucial to this issue because the Qataris are both speaking to the Israelis and Hamas. And I think our focus, the UK's focus, is alleviating the situation in Gaza and primarily also getting the hostages being held by Hamas released. There are fears that there are British hostages among those people too. So it seems that is the focus. And the concern from the UK government side, I think, is that if Israel goes, whilst they won't say this publicly yet, if Israel is seen to be acting disproportionately, what the UK is really concerned about and what the Americans are concerned about is the potential for other actors in the region to be drawn in. So we've heard a lot about the fact that Hezbollah in Lebanon, we could end up with them coming into the mix. We could have Syria coming in. So that seems to be what's driving the focus in the UK government.
Yeah. Bringing it all to home very abruptly, Humza Yousaf, the First Minister of Scotland, his in-laws are in Gaza. He's been talking about that. Indeed, his mother-in-law was interviewed on Times Radio a couple of days ago. He's been sort of encouraged. He's been calling for restraint on Israel's part, but he's also been suggesting he's not been getting the support he'd like from the British government. What do you know about what's happening there?
Yeah, so obviously that was a series of quite emotional interviews that he gave yesterday. I think a lot of people can empathise with his position. I mean, I think he probably has a fair point that he was trying to raise this issue and he hadn't heard anything from the Foreign Secretary. What I can tell you this morning, Hugo, is that that's changed since he did those interviews. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, has actually spoken now to Humza Yousaf. I'm told they spoke last night. They had quite a lengthy discussion, which sources that I spoke to described as a good conversation. They discussed specifically the situation with Brits in Gaza and Israel, and they are going to continue to keep talking. So I think Humza Yousaf was probably quite justified in raising his concerns, but that message has certainly got through. But just again, for balance, it was pointed out to me this morning that when Cleverly went to Israel earlier this week, he did in fact speak to his Israeli counterparts about the situation of British nationals trapped in Gaza, and specifically raised the case of Humza Yousaf's in-laws. So he did do that.
Just Humza Yousaf didn't necessarily know that
because he hadn't been told.
Do we? I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do we have any idea what kind of numbers we're talking about in terms of both Israeli hostages in Gaza and Gazans within Gaza who may be British nationals?
Yeah, so we don't. I'm afraid that the intel. I don't even think the British government, to be frank, has a rough number. From what I have been told, and this is very much an estimate, we're thinking about single-figure Brits, British citizens who may be being held hostage. But the sad reality is that no one really has an idea if these people are alive or not.
Absolutely.